What's going on, folks? MediaBeast here to present to you guys When the Smoke Clears, where we give honest reviews of the latest video game releases. Today we're going to be discussing Final Fantasy XIII-2, and we'll start off with the story. This time around in Final Fantasy XIII-2, we follow the story of Sarah and Noel. Sarah, as you know, is the younger sibling of Lightning, who was the main protagonist in the previous story, and Noel is a boy from the future who has came back to the past in order to prevent the extinction of humans. Both of these guys set out into the future in order to find Lightning, because apparently everyone thinks she's dead, or that she sacrificed herself for Cocoon. Unlike Final Fantasy XIII, Final Fantasy XIII-2 gives you complete reign from the start. With that said, however, comes a little bit of drawback. The story in Final Fantasy XIII-2 is not as focused as it was in Final Fantasy XIII. In fact, it is very convoluted and it can be very confusing at times. And now we'll move on to presentation. Final Fantasy XIII-2 gives us everything we would expect from a current generation Final Fantasy. Great visuals? Check. Great soundtrack? Check. Some people may be doubtful of the soundtrack this time around because the soundtrack in Final Fantasy XIII-2 is very different from previous iterations. This time around we get plenty of genres. We get jazz, pop, rap, and even metal. While the soundtrack is different, it doesn't mean that it's bad. For one, I enjoyed the soundtrack a lot, especially after the fact that I got used to the rapping and all the heavy metal death streams. And now we'll move on to gameplay. With Final Fantasy XIII as its base, Final Fantasy XIII-2 has improved on many aspects of gameplay. As stated before, you get complete reign from the start. However, in Final Fantasy XIII-2, you go through the game with only 2 human characters. With that said, there aren't very many human characters to play with. In fact, the third-party member in Final Fantasy XIII-2 is replaced with monsters. These monsters can be captured throughout your progress, and there are at least 150 monsters that can be captured. Each monster has a unique role and a unique ability, and you can mix and match them if you wish. Further along the line, Square Enix is going to be releasing DLC packs. These DLC packs will probably include playable third characters, such as Lightning, Hope, or Saz. The active time battle is still very much intact and still just as fun. A new addition to the battle system is the cinematic sequences, and these are basically your quick time events. Upon completion of these quick time events, you get extra bonuses that will help you throughout the battle, and these quick time events usually happen during boss battles. As I was saying before, Final Fantasy XIII-2 is not as linear as it was in Final Fantasy XIII. This time around, you get towns and you get playable mini games, and you get to explore as much as you want. There is a zone in Final Fantasy XIII-2 where you can go if you want to take a break from the storyline. This place is called Serendipity, and here you can gamble away and you can participate in chocobo races to your heart's content. Overall, the gameplay has improved tenfold and is just as fun, if not even more fun, than Final Fantasy XIII. And as for our closing comments, while many of the improvements made in Final Fantasy XIII-2 have been in the gameplay department, Square Enix could have probably gave a bit more love to the story aspect of the game. I found it very confusing at times, and I know that time traveling is a very hard subject to make sense of, but that shouldn't be an excuse for Square Enix to completely ignore the story aspect of the game and just give us a shoddy story. In fact, we don't even get closure in the story at all. At the end of the game, we get hit with the "to be continued" screen, and that could either mean another sequel in the works or DLC installments that will finish off the story. Despite all of that, Final Fantasy XIII-2 is a nice direction to take considering what Final Fantasy XIII was. We got better gameplay, more exploration, and we got mini games. Tons of content is available in this game, as you can also replay many of the time plots in the game. The visuals are also great, and hopefully the soundtrack can convince you to become a fan. With all that said, MediaBeast gives Final Fantasy XIII-2 a C+. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to check out our other video series like Hype Up in the Morning After. Also, check out our website and check out our podcast at www.mediabeast.net. I'm Eric, and stay classy, San Diego.